the focus of today's discussion is going to be AI, artificial intelligence, and its application in the EMS industry. And to that end, I've invited all this to us, and I think are uniquely positioned to help in this conversation. Our guests today, and I'll have them introduce themselves in greater depth shortly, are Mattias Andersson, the founder and CEO of MTech, and also Sebastian Schaal, the founder of Luminovo. Gentlemen, thank you, welcome. Thank you for joining in our conversation today. Been looking forward to this one, and we've already had a very interesting kind of a pre-chat before this, which I wish we could have recorded. But why don't we start, for the benefit of the audience, Sebastian, maybe begin with you. Maybe give an introduction to yourself and to your organization, please.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Eric. Super excited to be here. So as already said, I'm Sebastian. I'm originally from Munich, Germany. I started as an electrical engineer at the TU Munich in my undergrad and graduate studies. I got some practical experience in that field, working for Intel Mobile Communications, also here in Munich, and as a consultant for McKinsey. I then decided to do a second master's program and go abroad to the States, to Silicon Valley, and did my second program at Stanford, where I was focusing a little bit on the quantitative business side, but then got drawn into the force field of technology, because when you were at Stanford in 2015, there was basically no escape to the force field of AI, which was super hyped at the time. So this is when I decided to take my linear algebra knowledge from my EE degree to good use and double down on machine learning, with specifically the focus on neural networks. And yeah, I was in the US on a Fulbright scholarship, which was kind of also with the incentive of coming back to Germany and bringing what I've learned back home. And this is where I went back, worked for computer vision companies in the robotics space, Munich, and then reunited with my friend and colleague Timon, who also were at Stanford and Google quickly after, to then come back and start Luminovo. So Luminovo originally started 2.5 years ago as an AI solutions company with focus on neural network-based algorithms. So we basically did a bit of pure consulting, but then mainly focused on agency work. We did for 20 clients, around 30 projects that were mainly centered around kind of 3 areas. One being computer vision applications, 2 natural language processing stuff, and 3 complex system optimization. So just giving you like a little perspective, we did visual inspection for the automakers Daimler and Volkswagen. We did basically automatic processing of PDF documents for a seller of industrial products, and we did test optimization algorithms for chip verification for the chip maker Intel. It's also here in Munich. And yeah, it was a super exciting time, but then we kind of wanted to stop thinking from project to project and really follow a big vision in an industry that's close to our hearts. And this is when we decided to ramp down our AI project work and focus on product development in the electronics industry, which is kind of the start of Luminovo 2.0, where we try to bring our cloud native AI-driven software knowledge with building also first-class user experience knowledge to making processes in the electronics industry more collaborative, data-driven, and automated. These are kind of the 3 principles we're following. And we're currently about to launch our first product, LumiQuote, which will hopefully live up to the promise of becoming the next generation RFQ software for the electronics industry. And I'm personally at Luminovo currently responsible for business and product. And yeah, super excited to be on the show today.
Very good. Thank you. Mattias, tell us about you.
Yes, I'll try to make it short. Thank you, Eric. Nice to be on the show. Mattias Andersson, the founder of MTech, background from the electronics industry for the last 25 years or so. I was way back when working for Nokia. Got the opportunity to be part of the data management team, where we developed and deployed neural networks and closed loop machine learning some 25 years ago. Be able to predict process outcome. Been in the industry ever since, developing a lot of quotation models for EMS industry. Started MTech actually 2002, developing software I sold to Fuji for machine calibration and changeover optimization. Co-wrote 4 books on the subject, production and design. Started, as Sebastian put it, I'm not as fast as him, but some years down the line, I came to the insight that it's nice to travel, not all the time though. So we twisted MTech into a product company, a software company. So today we have an application center in Sweden where we do adaptive automation, completely software driven, and under a solution called MCell, or manufacturing cells. And we just launched the MBrain, which is the factory intelligence system that allows clients to connect to machines, any machine on the shop floor, and contextualize data, kind of unsilo the information that is already there, and allow the customer to help evolve the value that they provide to their clients. And I think that's an important situation for clients. How can we support our clients to continue to provide a higher value to their end clients? So that's short about me.
Very good. Thank you very much. Before we get into the whole AI piece of this, let me just ask, I mean, the world is just still living through a pandemic here. So I'm just kind of curious what impact that has had on you particularly, and also your business operations during this time, and if there's been any impact in where things stand today. Sebastian, why don't we come back to you first on that?
Yeah, for us, actually, COVID, as weird as it sounds, acted probably rather as an accelerator than a showstopper, because at the time we were still, half of the company was still working on projects at that time, like still heavily for Volkswagen, and didn't really start the product development efforts yet. And when the lockdown got announced in Germany, also our shop floor project at Volkswagen got to a brutal stop, and we kind of had to decide, okay, the slow ramp down we originally had planned is not happening, so we have to kind of full force switch over to our product development efforts. And I think that kind of like reunited the company quicker to our new mission, and I think we wouldn't be where we are today already if this wouldn't have happened. Also, at the time, we were closing our first our financing round for this new journey with 2 of the leading seed funds in Germany. And yeah, that also timing-wise worked perfectly right before the lockdown. We kind of got that secured. So basically, we were there with a new mission, with cash on the bank, and could really literally lock ourselves down and double down on developing our product. And I think generally in Germany, the situation was handled, I think, fairly well. Social distancing, we have like moderate mask policies going on. We have a tracking app that's working. So I'm actually pretty happy with how the German government has handled the situation. And so far, it's almost back to normal with a few always very local basic setbacks or like harder constraints. But yeah. So far, yeah, I think for us, the situation is okay now. We're in safer grounds, and we're of course hoping that the situation stays as calm as it's right now. We don't hit that brutal of a second wave that we had with the first one.
Yeah. No. Thank you for that. Mattias, how's it up in Sweden?
Sweden has been passing this fairly well, I would say. I'm really sorry for the situation that's been affecting a lot of people privately and professionally. I would say that coming back pre-COVID, our key mission is to help companies digitize and automate. That's our sweet spot. With the increased need of reshoring production, that's something that we have been driven on, because we can contribute to that. And now during COVID, the requests for that from clients has just exploded. We've had some good customers dialogues ongoing and projects before, but now during COVID, the interest for the service that we provide has basically exploded. Looking in Sweden, it's a good way to be located 3 hours north of Stockholm. We're kind of naturally isolated. So we're lucky on that perspective. We've walked through this without any major incidents. People work from home whenever they feel any cold or any symptoms, but it's a new world we're entering into with new behavior. Just this digital approach it's exploding, and people are getting used to it. So I think post-COVID, already people are now rethinking their strategy moving forward. And I'm happy to be in this space. I believe that manufacturing should be moved closer to the markets where its products are to be used.
Yeah, and it creates opportunity, doesn't it? It creates opportunity, and it's interesting what both of you say, because whenever I talk to companies that are at that vanguard of innovation, they found that the pandemic has been an accelerant for demand. So there's definitely a requirement out there. It shone a light on some of the issues that are there with traditional manufacturing, and it's kind of set us or accelerated us on a path forward. Do you feel that we're at a bit of an innovation tipping point, and those companies like yourselves that are ready to shake things up are being listened to much more than they perhaps would have done pre-pandemic?
I would say definitely yes, because I think the maturity of the customers understanding now when they can't travel, still want to monitor and make sure the manufacturing is happening, because we know that the industry is still ongoing on a high pace. And I think that's the maturity is there. So I think its timing is, it's a good timing. And innovation is, we have to change our delivery model, which we've done during the time.
Yeah, we talked a bit about that before, Mattias, but this idea of remote deployment has become even more important, and that's true with different products that that you guys have. So I was interested, Sebastian, that you were in the US working on this, and Mattias, you worked all around the world. When you look at AI, it's become a bit of a modern day space race for some of the nations. And if you hear what's coming out of the US and you hear what's coming out of China, it's difficult to know where everybody is. Do you guys have a view on who's winning the AI race? Where is the hotspot for development, or is it pretty neutral? Is it everywhere? You're both laughing because you're going to say Munich and you're going to say 3 hours north of Sweden. That's the hotspot. But who's ahead in that game?
I mean, I think if you it's just recent reports. I mean, it's always the question how you decide who's ahead. I think if you look at publications at the leading AI conferences, the US is still leading the pack. But it's like if you look at the growth from last year's, for example, Europe's conference to this year's, China has, I think, had by far the biggest increase, and is now in reaching distance to the US. So I think it's pretty clear that they're catching up quickly. And if one book I can totally recommend is AI Superpowers by Kai-Fu Lee, who is basically, it's about China, Silicon Valley, and the New World Order, who basically makes a very, very strong case why China will eventually win the AI race. Specifically, when you think about today's day and age of AI, which he describes, a lot of other people describe as the age of AI implementation. We actually talked about this before in our pre-discussion, that now you're mainly not winning a race in a specific use case because you have done 5 years of research in your own lab, but mainly because you know how to leverage open source, cutting edge research and apply it to your field, twist and tune it a little bit, but mainly feed it with data from your industry, from your context, and ideally infuse a little bit of industry knowledge into it. And this age of AI implementation is where he makes a strong case that China is actually, very well equipped to win this race. But I think, again, there are places where I think, being in Europe, but also being in the US, where we are actually very strong from our past, where we could potentially leverage, build up these great data sets if we finally start working on this, where we could still have a chance to win in a few niche applications, or even like broader niche applications. So that's just my take.
And I agree with you, Sebastian, totally. I think looking through the future now belongs to the companies or the individuals or the organizations that actually can contextualize it, get away from the buzzwords, get away from all the nice PowerPoints and showcase real use cases. Everyone is striving to find put AI in a context. Of course, you have all the vision recognition, you have all those parts, which is very much driven by the apps of today. What I believe going to happen is that we have within our industry, there is so much data available that the company that starts, take ASM for instance, being really good, take Koyong, which sits on an amazing amount of data that could be made available to help companies evolve further. And I think, yes, China and US, I think we're going to see other areas as well, Middle East in terms of Israel coming out. There's many countries are now putting a ton of money after it, after trying to make a solution and then find a problem to solve. I think when you contextualize it, things will move faster. So.
Yeah. Well, let's take it into the EMS industry then. So where do you see, I mean, you are both creating solutions for the EMS industry. What issues in EMS do you think are the most appropriate for AI to be applied to?
Let Sebastian start on that.
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead, Sebastian.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always like, I'm
so
giving the broader context and you can dive into it. So, I mean, for me, it's always how the question is how you structure this whole thing. The value chain is one, the types of data is one, but I always like to structure these things by the problem type. So I think I always see three problem types. One is basically a perception task that we're trying to solve, a forecasting task, or kind of an optimization problem. And if you think about the perception task, it's basically kind of this automating judgment, expert knowledge. I think this is normally the case where a human could assess this task if we would have the time and resources to do it, but we can try to teach it to a machine. And I think there are applications from thinking about quality control. I mean, the next AOI systems will be a lot more powered by intelligent algorithms, talking about text-based processes, right? We're thinking about scrubbing bill of materials, for example, which are currently very rule-based, where you can in the future have more machine learning type approaches baked into it, but also thinking about how can you scale design rule checks beyond something that's currently very hard-coded in some of the ECAD tools. Forecasting tasks, of course, generally I'm always like a little bit skeptical in some of them because predicting the future is like basically impossible, but sometimes you can find correlations that have maybe some causal effects where I always never mistake the two. But I think there, of course, thinking about forecasting prices and trends on procurement and sourcing is some trend we'll see. And of course, this very long manufacturing buzzword of predictive maintenance, we might, with the next generations, really have a breakthrough when basically machines are ready for this. And lastly, these optimization tasks, which for me always is a task where we just don't know the perfect solution. Like with a perception problem, we know the exact answer, but for optimization tasks, we just don't know the perfect solution. And I think one of the things where a lot of people are, of course, thinking this can be solved in the future a little bit differently is the whole idea of design, board design, layouting. I know we're not talking about the next best auto router here, but I think the techniques, specifically in reinforcement learning being a subfield of AI, have shown that they are capable of solving very complex NP-hard mathematical optimization problems, which can't be solved with classical algorithms in linear time. And there is some research going on in this field, which will still take a few years, but I think this is where we could potentially see also a breakthrough happening within the next 5 years. So that's just my classification here.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I think what you guys are doing, Sebastian, is a perfect use case for AI, where you have a lot of available information. You can tie it back to the design information as well. And I think from my perspective, I've been having a lot of discussions regarding AI and how to deploy it and looking on availability on data sets. Mm-hmm. So some of the approach having the models where you need a couple of years of data, which basically within manufacturing is usually not available because the product life cycles are reduced so much, and the second you get a bias data set in, you kind of tip the entire model. So I think the use case for AI is, of course, I think very much tied down to vision recognition, being one, looking to the instrumental and look into the potential of Coyongs and the Viscoms and the guys. I think having, from our perspective, I think, of course, I'm biased, having the possibility for engineers and technicians and operators to create data models that they can actually further enhance the neurals and actually create value from the data. I think that is, of course, what we're aiming for. So.
And when you look at those data sets, obviously the more data you've got, the better off you are. The more contextualized, the better off you are. The more you can close those loops between different systems, the better off you are. Does that mean that AI has a more natural role at a system level rather than at a specific machine level? Because that seems to be where we are a little bit at the moment. You're seeing MES companies maybe think about AI and how it's applied, but you're also seeing specific equipment companies use AI within their own systems to maybe recognize specific issues. Where does that AI modeling belong, or is it in both and it just needs to be synthesized? Mattias, I think that's maybe one for you initially.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. It has to be in both areas, because there's solving direct problems on the edge. You have companies such as Stream Analyzer Sweden, you have Econo and those guys that does AI solutions or small AI engines that help the customers to quickly deploy models. And I think there are things that you have now, ERP and cloud, those things where AI can actually come to play, which is more of a system perspective. We have information that you can draw benefit from on product level, be in the PLM systems. We'll start to add more AI features and functions to it. And I think you're going to see, now I would say, my expectation is for the next 3 years, because the development is so quick, is that you're going to see a lot of different puzzle pieces now start to come together.
I think, as you said, I think one of the major challenges is basically also the infrastructure around it, right? Because I mean, with these more modern approaches to machine learning, talking about neural networks, basically the tilt between how much power and processing power you need for training versus using and deploying and running the model becomes more and more skewed. Meaning, like, on doing training and inference on the same machine is often like not that beneficial anymore. So how can you really take the data from the edge to a place where you can maybe even pool it with other sources, train a model, but then efficiently deploy it back to the machines, and the whole infrastructure around it, this whole machine learning DevOps is, I think, one of the also challenges we're seeing today. If you look at, I think 90% of machine learning projects never make it to production, and that's often because all the logistics around it, because the machine learning code is often that much, and the whole stuff around it, talking from data to the deployment, is really what's holding us back most of the times. So I think that's why something what you're building, like basically this operating system to bring this to the machines, Mattias, is I think exactly one of the ways to go to really make this usable and applicable and for many people.
Yeah. I see huge enthusiasm for AI amongst the software guys, amongst the equipment guys, and certainly some people that are involved in that industry 4.0 transformation and want to manage the huge complexity and the huge amount of data. What I'm curious about is there enthusiasm in the C-suite of these EMS companies? They've got a traditional business model that's maybe 4 decades old in many cases, and you know, even the way they've optimized their processes and stuff is quite traditional. Are they ready to make this change? Are they bold about this? What do you see from people you're speaking to, Mattias?
Yeah,
what are the customers asking for?
Customers always asking to be able to provide more value to end customers. That's everything that combines it. So from a C-level within any EMS or product owner, as long as we can put more, it's the same thing as the development of the ASIC. More features in lesser area provides higher value at a lower cost. So the same thing for an EMS, to make sure that they are competitive enough, making sure that they can engage faster with their end clients, being the product owners, and at the same time simplify that work in order for them to provide higher value so the product owner choose them. I think as a C-level EMS, that's what business is all about, making sure you take the right decisions at the right time, whereas AI would be a helpful tool, making sure that the information that you gather, you actually contextualize and use in a good way forward. So,
yeah, I also am with you. I think that generally it's always, if you see someone just selling AI as the main value proposition, then they have no value proposition. Like it's like super for it now, but like this is, I think, one of my beliefs, right? Because normally, as he said, AI is a tool, right? It's one method of solving complex problems. And if it's not solving a problem that has value to the customer, then it's basically worth nothing. So I think, as you said, when we use these systems to kind of bring basically from our side, make this RFQ process, which is like this kind of overhead, but it's necessary to get new business. If we make that faster, and you can actually use the systems to get better prices even, and make it the experience even more collaborative to the customer, then you have a value. And the same when you can do the manufacturing a lot more effective, find defects earlier, and just streamline the production process, then the value you're selling is not AI, but like a more efficient production line. And I think that is where we have to go. And then if it's AI or just like very good engineering behind the scenes that is not really using any advanced neural network-based algorithms, then that doesn't really matter as long as there's a value for the customer.
Yeah. As long as you're delivering that value. And, I'm just trying to think of very specific examples and drill down. Are there examples you can give of that? Mattias, when you look at something like the M-cell configuration, I think you use some AI on there with respect to learning its surroundings and this zero-touch programming approach you take. Just talk me through an example of where AI is changing, is a game changer in terms of the way automation, for example, is deployed.
Yeah, for instance, we have been working in a world where people are teaching people. Up until recently, we've been in a position where people are training a robot. This is a perfect situation where you can allow a robot to train a robot on certain specific repetitive tasks. And that's where we're at. And we're using our tools to help understand and the variations are, and predict the variations and adjust to the variations as one thing. And not only that, but also contextualizing that with the product, knowing that, okay, we have one case where wave solder palette, we're deviating a little bit, and we of course we use machine learning to allow the robot or the M cell to adjust itself. But the key thing with that is that actually provided really good feedback to the maintenance department and the process engineering. So once again, contextualizing information, making it in chewable chunks, basically.
Yeah. And Sebastian, in your case, it's in the quotation process. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for us as in general, I think the first step that we talked about data a lot before is for us to really, this is currently a workflow that's very often siloed in different Excel sheets, sometimes across organizations. So I think the first step for us to unlock some value with AI is to make this whole process one very nice cloud native digital process where we can then start using more and more ML down the line. But I think the first use case that, for example, we're currently building out is in a sense this whole bomb scrubbing topic, which has been, of course, a pain for a lot of people. A lot of people have already worked on this. But I think from our past, also we've worked a lot about document extraction and like like basically scrubbing data for business processes in the past. This is something that we think we can kind of combine our growing domain expertise with some horizontal text processing capabilities we have to make this process even more intelligent and seamless for the customer.
You've both talked about the siloing of data sets, right? And you know, when I think of AI, I think that what it really requires is clean data in real time, right? In order to be most effective, right? I mean, like said, 3 years of data, it becomes almost meaningless, right? As you said, Mattias, right? So where are we in the evolution of that, in getting kind of clean data in real time, and what's inhibiting that?
Yeah. From our perspective, the way that we are approaching that is that we allow the customer to continue evolve the data modeling. I don't know if I mentioned this now, but if data is the new oil, data models are the new pumps. So by providing the initial data models for the customers to start deploying and start using, the next stage is, of course, to allow the customers to evolve it themselves. So creation of data models and in a simple way will reduce the complexity of it.
Yeah, I think one of the important things is also that like companies from basically spread across the value chain start like working together a lot more, right? Because there's a lot of stuff, if there are these data models from the production side that can kind of with an API find its way earlier upstream in the value chain, then there's so much things we could potentially infer, thinking about like this whole design of excellence, like huge paradigm, where the main issue is often that just data sits in silos. And if these two people would only talk to each other, then we wouldn't have that problem, but it's just not happening. But maybe if we take the human out of the equation for one sake, and the data can flow from A to B, then we could unlock these values. And I think that's super important when it comes to that. And one phrase I also always like about this idea of how much value does data actually have. I think as from Element AI, one of the Canadian AI consultancies, that said that the value of data is basically the minimum of how much revenue can we make from it, how much does it cost you to reproduce it, and how much does it cost me to buy it from the market, right? And as you said, if you have these data sitting there and you're not using it, then they're worth nothing. If you can just buy them from the market, they're worth nothing in a sense. And I think that really doubling down on your data for your process, where you know you can make value from, this is where you really have these gold mines you should start digging for.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is to hear both of you speak, because there's some, and just so the audience know, this is the first time these two guys have met, but you're both using very much the same language, this idea of breaking down silos, this idea of releasing or unleashing the value of that data by using things like AI to contextualize that data. I think there's a lot of common language there that I find really interesting, and I think that gives us a clear vision of where we're going on the journey, because it is all about achieving value for the customer and delivering that value. How far do you think AI can go in terms of its potential? You guys are both AI evangelists to a certain extent. Do you see a scenario where big chunks of the production, big chunks of the supply chain are managed by AI, and then it's only when there are kind of unusual exceptions that humans have to get involved, and most of the decisions are made by AI? How do you see that moving, and at what speed? Sebastian?
I think that's fairly possible, right? I think if you talked about the supply chain, right? I mean, currently the state is often that, you know, we don't want to get prices for some components on your BOM. You still have to kind of sometimes either call up or email your favorite contact at your distributor. But when more and more stuff is pushing towards APIs there, I think then it's just like a small step where you can also have like these basically procurement bots who are kind of trying to find a market equilibrium and trying to get the best prices out there. I think that's something. I mean, if you think about finance, I mean, if you're still trading by yourself, you have to be aware that you're trading against like algorithmic trading algorithms that are beating you to the show. And I think that's something that cannot totally happen, that supply chain as well. But also I think there are these cases where it's really like we humans just think in maybe 3, take time 4 dimensions, right? These systems can easily parse through 10,000s of data points and dimensions. So I think using AI to really uncover that whole mess of data, talking about the supply chain, taking all the different nodes that you can when data is connected, combine, and then really trying to flag these situations where the human should intervene, are the things I think where it's going to go. I'm a strong believer of these human-machine hybrid systems that are really splitting the work by what can machines do well is the stuff that they have understood, and then scale that infinitely. What the humans can do very well is like really work with unusual situation and transfer knowledge from A to B. And I think that's a split that we will increasingly see. But of course, that doesn't mean that like expert processes that we see today, as I said, this like idea of design automation, how we see it in the chip industry, that this might eventually now come to the board design level, which is like a white collar job, where we will just restart where everyone has to kind of start working with these systems and instead of against these systems. I think that's an approach where we have to go.
Yeah. No, and I say from my perspective is that as I believe this is will be a part of the toolbox moving forward, of course, in so many different areas, and provide better decision support and being able to take quicker decisions, understand anomalies in supply chain. At the same time, the devil is in the details, knowing that why does the solder paste change viscosity after a couple of minutes of standstill, and of course the effect that one has on the fillet in the stencil. Of course, the SPI will start to react, and the placement machines will start to deviate, and those things, everything is combined. And without having that contextualized approach, I think AI can help us, specifically when it's supervised, and that you have a reinforced learning approach. The unsupervised learning, to a certain extent, of course, will be interesting. But as you say, Sebastian, the only thing that is hard to predict is the future. I think we can contextualize it and making sure that we put the intelligence first and then artificial to it. So,
I wanted to share a question that we got actually from the editor of EMS now prior to this, and I thought it was a good one. It seems to touch on what both of you gentlemen have been talking about here. And what she posed was that AI has been defined as an opinion wrapped in code, and believe that the people writing the code for hardware manufacturing have a deep enough understanding of the complexities of electronics manufacturing. And Mattias, why don't you take that? Because I mean, clearly with your Nokia background, what you've done, the answer seems to be yes for you. But if you're looking more generally at the field and what's going on out there, how do you assess it?
I think, if I understood the question right, I think for an SMT line, for instance, if you have the standstill of all the different cross-process correlations that you can actually understand, contextualizing that and actually putting it in context with a root cause analysis, I think that's the way that we're going to see. We're going to see design tools that are reinforced by AI that is actually linked to their actual process results. So I can get a pad stack performance of 24 or 400 or 4,000 different manufacturers. At the same time, I think we can reach 80% of the performance with all the tool sets that we have now. And I think the last 20% will always be human driven. So,
I mean, for me, like as the opinion wrapped into a model, it's somewhat fairly right? Because how do these things work? They're maximum likelihood operators. They're basically always predicting, in a sense, what, given the context it has understood, what's the most likely scenario. And but the more we move into these more like integrated systems, talking like deep neural networks, it's actually more not about the opinion of the engineer or the knowledge of the engineer, but the richness of the data. And have you actually seen all the edge cases, and are there holes in your data set that you know when you're getting out of that distribution and you come into one of these holes in data set, the model will not know what to do at all. And I think that's that's more the danger is not that much that these engineers are not that well educated electronic manufacturing guys, but more that we have substantial flaws in data collection, and that will kind of screw up the process down the line.
Yeah, so you have to have a holistic approach to data. You have to break down those silos, break down those walls, but you do have to have that deep domain knowledge that is actually teaching the system. That's where that comes from, and that learning of what the cause and effect is. You know, something that you see in AOI at the very end of the line could have come all the way through from the very beginning of the line, and you know, it could be a thermal process affecting you know, mixing with something that's happened on the stencil, or you know, it's a very complex dynamic, and you've got to build all that into the system, and the AI's got to help with that and help with the protect you from that huge complexity as well, because we are deriving more and more data. One of the things you both talked about was this hybrid idea of the machine-human interface, and I think that's really interesting here. We've talked before on shows about the skill sets that are available in the industry and the skill shortages that exist as well. In terms of expertise, how do you think AI changes the skill mix requirement, and do we have enough of the right data experts coming through to fill all the roles?
I think my personal view is that it's providers of tools, AI or similar, has a responsibility to provide simplicity in the tools, because we can write a quadrillion lines of code, but the only purpose of that is to simplify it to such a level that any operator, technician, or engineer can use it without a threshold. And that's a journey.
Yeah. I think what's actually most needed is really for actual businesses is not the AI researcher, but more the AI engineer or data engineer. Some of you call them the devsumer, that kind of can consume the super awesome tooling that we have out there that is abstracting so much of the pain away. That when I started like 2015 with the first neural networks, it's basically, it took you half a day to install the packages. And today it's basically, as you said, there's so much toolings and layers above it, basically teaching the people how to work with the data and then applying it. I think that's like where we have the most shortage, but then also people not thinking just because before there was an automation of blue collar jobs that this can't affect you as a white collar worker, because also you have to start to work with these tools, as I said before. And I think that's the one thing that where AI is a little bit different to like other forms of automation that we've seen before, that it doesn't depend on blue collar, white collars, but it really depends on the use case. And if it's like if there's a clear mapping that we can build from A to B, then there's a very high likelihood that you could potentially have AI at least augment the process.
Yeah.
And it's augmenting, I think, is the key. It's people augmented by automation. It's people augmented by really smart software, by AI, and it's getting that mix of which tasks suit the operator and which tasks suit the engineer and which tasks suit the AI backbone.
Right. Hey, listen, we're going to have to wrap here shortly, so I just want to kind of give you each a kind of an opportunity for some closing comments. And you know, I guess my question to set that up would be, you know, where do you see the continued potential of AI within this field? And do you see it, I mean, how far can it go? Will it end up even designing products? You know, where are the, you know, how do you see the future is, I guess, the question. And start with you, Sebastian.
I mean, prediction about the future, as I said before, are always tough. But
yeah, I know.
Yeah,
that's why we asked the question.
Exactly. But I think so we are very far away from a like general purpose AI taking over a lot of different applications, like in this like Terminator-like scenarios. So I think that's not something we really have to be worried about so far, but really just taking it step by step and infusing it to the tool. So what I think will happen is that in a few years, everyone every day will be in contact like you are today already. When you talk about like being it Siri or being it your photo search on your phone, it's all basically augmented by AI. I think that will be even more there, and every tool will have like AI models in the background. And then on the other hand, I think there will be these when it comes to chat interfaces, so basically dialogue systems. I think this will be the first frontier where we will really break into something that we can start to compare to some general intelligence. But I think when we're talking about really this hardware related topics, I think it's a long way to go until we can really take the human out of the equation, if ever.
If ever, yeah. No, and I think from what I see and I believe is that we, of course, I really agree with you, Sebastian. We'll have a toolbox of different AI tools that will augment everything that we do, and it will help us take better decisions faster. I do believe that the near future is going to be very much related to the improvement of the customer experience using AI tools. So having design houses or product owners anywhere in the world being able to predict risks, being able to see deviations and variations, kind of highlighting it in order to deploy better products and being able to meet supply and meet demand. I think we have a lot of AI tools such as yours, Sebastian, that will allow customers to get better visibility over the supply chain. I think those are the things that we're going to see in the near 12 to 24 months. And then after that, of course, when we can get more design information tied into it, of course, you have all the different pad designs and pad stacks and what have you. Then we can start to link it back to the process. I think we are, for the next 5 years, we're going to be spending a lot of time on cross-process correlations and contextualizing. Then the next evolution after that is adding further value using those toolboxes.
Yeah, and I see that value coming from, augmented insight. So you're augmenting the human operator, and there's this learning relationship between the operator and the AI. And the other big thing is this managing of complexity, because as we gain more data, if we're going to use that data and derive value from it, we're creating very, very complex models that use domain expertise in so many different areas. So managing that complexity is going to be huge. But yeah, I see AI playing a big role in the future in both of those areas.
No, thank you for that. It's interesting. My background is organizational psychology. So it's, I always felt that in business, humans were always the confounding variable that seemed to screw everything up. When you get competing agendas and motivations and whatever, and it seems like humans are both a pro and a con in the AI field as well. As you said, Sebastian, they'll never do away with them, but boy, they'll be challenging to handle in the in-between, right? So anyway, I want to say thank you to you both. This has been fascinating, and again, I wish we should have started recording an hour ago with a pre-chat. That was fascinating as well. To Sebastian, Mattias, thank you for joining us to sit with you, my friend. To the audience, I would say we're doing these shows every 2 weeks. We have some other exciting ones coming up through the rest of the year, so please look to those. And we thank you for your time, and gentlemen, again, thank you very, very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, guys. Thanks.